All right. So very good day and welcome back to yet another very interesting session. And this time we'll be talking on the subject addressing macro policy challenges for effective preparedness and response. And as the title suggests, today we would be focusing on the challenges in the macro policies at national and international level and the difficulties faced in developing and implementing effective policies to prepare for and respond to disasters. So, macro policies do play a crucial role in strengthening the national preparedness and response during disasters. And as we have seen over the past few years, emergencies can have devastating impact on communities, economies, and global health. So, these good macro policies, such as, let's say, effective disaster risk reduction strategies or contingency planning, financial protection for individuals through insurance schemes, or even like social protections, where programs like cash transfer, social insurances, and safety nets can help in protecting vulnerable populations during disasters. And it's quite evident that there are some existing challenges in these macro policies which has to be addressed, especially in the context of India. It is important that government policymakers and international organizations should work together to address these challenges and ensure effective preparedness and response in the future, like the upcoming disasters. So, understanding this importance, Spear India Academy, in collaboration with Climate Action Resource Network, Asia Pacific CARN-AP, and Barnelli Pellojuki Foundation, is organizing this webinar to better understand the challenges and propose potential recommendations. I'm more than happy to say that we have a fantastic line of experts who will be sharing their insights and experience. And we hope that you will find this event very informative and engaging. So let's, without any delay, let's dive in and explore the ways in which we can collectively build a more resilient and sustainable future. So once again, I would like to thank everybody, our speakers, moderator organizers, and all the participants who joined today. And before starting, let me briefly introduce our eminent panelists for today. Starting with Dr. Pradeep Sahni, professor, Indira Gandhi National Open University. He has around 40 years of teaching and research experience. He has contributed to the disciplines of public administration and disaster management. He has a number of publications, including 10 authored and edited books to his credit. He was the organizing secretary of the International Conference on Disaster Management, Cooperative Networking in South Asia, Governance for Development, Issues and Strategies, and workshop on livelihood options for disaster risk reduction. He was the director of the project entitled Community Awareness on Disaster Preparedness, sponsored by the Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India. He was also the principal investigator of National Disaster Management Authority, Indira Gandhi National Open University's project on capacity building in disaster management for government officials and representatives of Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies at district level. We would like to welcome you to this session, sir. Moving on, we have Ms. Devadrita Sen-Gupta, Manager, Advocacy Save the Children. She started as a child champion as early as in secondary school and has 15 years of experience in working with children and in different contexts, part of it as an academia and other part as a practitioner. She has worked in both government and non-government organizations, and her roles include urban planning, policy advocacy, humanitarian response and recovery leadership, DRR, and resilience programming and interagency coordination. She is currently a humanitarian focal in Save the Children. We welcome you also, ma'am, to this session. Moving on, we have our moderator, Dr. Albert Salamanca. He's a senior research fellow at the Stockholm Environment Institute's Asia Center, where he leads its climate change, disasters, and development cluster. He has over 20 years of experience working on climate change adaptation, natural resource management, conservation, development, and sustainable livelihood issues in several countries in Southeast Asia. His current research interests are on the themes of resilience, risk, and vulnerabilities, traditional ecological knowledge, mobility and spatial linkage, disaster displacement, and sustainable livelihoods. He is a member of UK GCRF Living Deltas Hub and the WIM Loss and Damage Expert Group on Slow Onset Events. With this, okay, so we also have our moderator here. So with this, I would like to open the session, and over to you, Dr. Albert.
Hi, thanks a lot. Thanks for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Bangkok. Now, we have an interesting set of panelists for today. We have Professor Pardeep, and we have Ms. Dibadrita Singupta. So maybe what we can do is that we can start with Professor Pardeep to get us into the discussions that we're going to have this afternoon. So there are three areas that Professor Pardeep will tackle on. One is on what are some of the main macro policy challenges in disaster management, and how do these challenges affect preparedness and response? And the second one is around lessons on what we have learned from the past disasters and emergencies, and how we can use these lessons to improve macro policy challenges. And then the third one is, what is the role of governments and policymakers in addressing macro policy challenges in disaster management? And how can we make governments accountable? So quite big topics to deal with, but I hope Professor Pardeep can lead us to a productive and fruitful engagement with this question. So Professor Pardeep, over to you.
Thank you very much, Albert. It is a pleasure to interact with you and together esteemed revered panelists and participants of today's webinar. And when I was just wondering that about the topic itself, macro policy challenges. As a student of public policy and disaster management as well as public administration, one is reminded of Thomas Altai, who in his book, Understanding Public Policy, says that public policy, whatever government uses, you are not doing. So from that particular perspective, it is not doing a particular thing is also a policy. So probably when the revered organizers did pick up this topic, at the back of their mind was the COVID which we had seen in the immediate past, right? So from that particular perspective, one just wondered
Professor Pardeep, can you check on your audio, because it seems you're coming in and out.
The audio is all right from my end. I don't have anything. Are you able to get me now?
We are able to hear. It's just a little bit of echo, which makes it a bit unclear. That we can hear you, but
okay. If it's okay with everyone, then we can proceed. Just let us know maybe on the chat box if the audio is not really working well. But sorry, apologies for that, Professor Pardeep, but please proceed.
No problem. In fact, it is better that you have raised it out, because if one is not being heard, then there is no fun of speaking also. So, well, I was just talking about it, that the topic has been chosen keeping the immediate backlash of effect which we have had of the COVID-19. So that is why it is being put across over for referring to and going or making a move ahead of. Because just last month, when we find that the World Disaster Report 2022 has seen the light of the day, again they are talking of this COVID-19 and the lessons learned from the points of the concern. The first thing which comes to mind is, as I was talking about, that it is so vast kind of a thing that one finds it difficult where to start and where to end and where to take it up. The first thing I put it up as a challenge is that is gap between theory and practice. Between theory and practice. Disaster that is happening, and since we find that there are many shortage history which are limited. In some way or the other, they have been managed. If we try to look at it so far as its effective management is concerned, probably one takes it down after more with the past during the past 50 years as a winter. If I take an example to this particular matter in India, See, we had this 77. Whereby the 11th schedule and the 12th schedule was added to the Constitution of India. Now, 11th schedule talks of the aspects to be taken care of in the rural areas by the Panchayati Raj institution. There are 3 types of the Panchayati Raj institution. In the Gram Panchayat, the Panchayat Samiti and the Jila Parishad, and these 3 are in existence at the village, at the block and at the district level respectively. And there are 29 subjects which have been passed on for the purpose of development planning by the rural local bodies, and so far as they are concerned. Likewise, in the urban local bodies, as per the 73rd Amendment, 12th schedule was tagged to it, constitutional amendment, and it has 18 subjects on which the urban local bodies have to work. Now, if these 29 plus 18 subjects are to be taken care of by the local bodies and the rural and the urban areas respectively, and if disaster management or disaster risk reduction or preparedness and response and recovery, they are mainstreamed into this particular thing, I think if not more than 75% of the work with regard to adding towards efficacy of the disaster management is concerned can be there. But unfortunate thing which is happening is that we have not been able to make a point whereby we find that, well, this is what is to be done of. Otherwise, all the 29 items listed under this 11th schedule for rural local bodies and 18 listed under the 12th schedule for urban local bodies, there are the activities pertaining to disaster preparedness, disaster response, and disaster recovery. And somehow or the other, we have even documented it also in this under this new NDMA national project which was there on the capacity building. So that is one thing whereby theoretically we say that, well, there is the development planning, there has to be done up, and development planning has to start right from the grassroots level. Now, then probably that is the point where from we have to mainstream the disaster risk reduction also, and pitching it up from there and moving up, we can probably do it. But theoretically, say that this is in existence, we have Article 243 of the Constitution of India, which talks of that, well, there has to be the planning from the grassroots and above. But with focus more now on preparedness and awareness, etc., all the things which are there with regard to the disaster, first phase of the disaster, we find that the gap is there between theory and the practice. Things are not taking place the manner in which they should take place. And that is just one illustration I have given you from India. It is a case with the same at every level also. Why it is so? Other challenge which comes to my mind is that there is this confusion on initiation towards prevention and preparedness culture. We say that we should have the preparedness culture and the prevention culture. Who is to build it up? Where from this culture will be formulated? What kind of practices need to be taken up, and who is to take up that particular practice and at what level? What is going to be the framework for putting up this particular prevention or the culture? There is a confusion on that is the other challenge. Then the third thing is that there is this unresponsive attitude towards preparedness. What has been happening? The way we have been attuned for that particular matter is that when we find that all our efforts are response activity. They are here.
Sorry, your sound was cut in between. Sorry, really sorry for interrupting, but can we have like a earphones or something? Like, do you have access to any headphones? Because it's getting a bit unclear. So, a small suggestion.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, it's better, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and really sorry for interrupting. Yeah.
No problem. I am sorry because I have forgotten what I was talking. nevertheless, I will have to take the thread again to come on to that. So when I was talking about that there is unresponsive attitude towards preparedness. When we say that, well, there has to be the prevention and preparedness culture, who is really the good part of the world one is getting into stock at the moment, and we are talking and posing it as putting it up as a macro challenge, a policy challenge. Responsiveness on the part of the agency towards preparedness, I say that it is unresponsive. Why I say it is unresponsive is because we do not find any kind of the set line of action which is presented to us whereby we have to take up this particular preparedness. Which agencies to do it, that is another thing which we will come on to it a bit later. That's of clarity in spelling out channels for streamlining disaster risk reduction. We know that there are staff agencies which are involved in making up of the policy. There are 9 agencies which are involved in execution of the policy. These agencies are there. The government is definitely a major role player so far as the disaster management is concerned, and it is running across all the 3 different facets of the disaster management. We find it that in government, if we say that it is a major stakeholder in this particular thing, that which agency has been given this particular task so far as this preparedness and prevention, etc. If we say that it has been passed on to the local bodies or to the rural or urban local bodies at the grassroots level, then obviously one draws a flag over there because one is not very clear and not very sure of that what would be and how the things are going to place. But because one doesn't find it taking place or happening in a manner in which it should happen. Another thing is that the responsibility is unfixed. Responsibility is unfixed. So far as the preparedness and the prevention and these kind of things are concerned, there are no fixed responsibilities which have been passed on. Why things are all these problems come across is because we have not been able to clearly demarcate that what is to be done by which particular department or organization. Now, what is happening is that all of us, those who are involved into this field of disaster management, we try to look at that particular aspect from our own perspective. But what is my background? What is my orientation towards that? What is my interest in that? I would like to take it up, peg it across in accordance with my own way of looking the things, which is making the things little clumsy over there. So far as the coordination is concerned, the coordination is loose, especially at the level of which we are now focusing, that is the prevention and the preparedness. There the coordination is loose because so many people are involved, so many organizations are involved. There are aid agencies, there are these international and international non-governmental organizations, those who are having best of the professionals which are available with them, they are having the best kind of a mind to work in this particular aspect, because but again the problem is that the coordination is not there, whereby the things can move in the given manner which can be done. Another thing which is a major challenge is that the community is not being involved. Where are we trying to do it? Whether we talk of awareness of the community, whether we talk of generating the awareness, whether we talk of that how community is to be involved so far as making up of the local plans are concerned, or how the community is to be made to be a part and parcel of the programs which are being conceived either by the agencies or by the government. Somewhere we find that when this kind of involvement of community is being looked into with that kind of a seriousness. The more focus what is being seen has been on the managerial solutions rather than a systemic orientation. The managerial solution probably will not do. We have to put the things into the system. Now, which system we have to put it across? Which is the agency which is being demarcated for taking up this particular thing? This is one of the major concerns. There is lack of coordinated efforts towards putting in place sustainable livelihood. I mean, this thing we are hearing of now for the past little more than 2.5 decades when we have started talking of sustainable livelihood framework and sustainable livelihood theories. But then what are we trying to do it for putting it in place, and who has to do it? Livelihood will not be sustained of its own. There has to be some kind of the drive which has to be put in place for the purpose of putting it over there, which is lacking. There is individualism, and the requirement is not individualism, the requirement is that of cooperativism. You know, recently what we have seen is that this Turkey earthquake, good number of the aid did come across, good number of the countries came forward to provide help. That is on the humanitarian count. It is very good, but it is only the where knows where the shoe pinches, right? We are talking of learning the lessons in what done when we had this Turkey earthquake in 1999 also, right? And the number of the casualties was there. Again, this time the number of the casualties is more. So that is understandable. But what is required is that when we say that, well, it has to be the coordinated effort, the concerted effort, where all are to be involved and all play their role in a way whereby they could lead the thing that they could bring out something worthy of it out of it. Another thing is that, well, I think the host was good enough to refer on to the point of insurance to be there in place in a big way. But unfortunately, we find it that, well, it is not being done. And we don't find that it is being put into place in the manner in which it should have been done across. So, well, that is again one of the challenges is there. I at least feel whatever little I have known about it is that the agenda is for translating knowledge, innovation, and education in actuality or in reality is not very clear about it, because the mechanism for putting up this agenda into action, that mechanism is found lacking. If we say that, well, it is through education, and we say that, well, in this 10-point agenda, 10-point agenda which has been given by the Congress of India, also talks about that it should be there at the university level. University level, when we talk some education to be provided, where it will get culminated. That is the point which needs to be seen across. That is again not there. The stakeholder boundaries are not defined. That who will be working up to what particular scale and up to what particular level. That needs the more clarification and clarity. There are the corrupt and the immoral practices which somehow or the other, by virtue of the human psyche or whatever we say, those again keep on creeping. Ultimately, what happens? What happens is that we are there's a question which has been raised over here, not question, but probably the observation that if an earthquake like that of Turkey control it. Now, when this earthquake had come up in Turkey, earlier I would like to submit it, when it had happened earlier in the late 1990s, I was again talking on to the participants in Uttarakhand at that point of time when we were having our community awareness project on disaster preparedness at the village level in Uttarakhand, the UP. Point that if this kind of earthquake had come across in Delhi, then probably the number of casualties would have been much more in comparison. Nevertheless, the point is disaster management can be looked into, that it has played its role over the period of time. When one looks at it and finds that, well, we are making progress, and progress in a good way which is being made towards managing the disasters in an effective way. But as we go up the ladder, we find that the more we achieve, the more is seen to be left which is yet to be achieved. So, well, that is not pointing out the gloomy side of it, but rather that is pointing out something good. Thereby, we have to work towards achievement of those particular. Now we find it there are agencies which are designated agencies, at least at the planning level, which are there in existence in good number of the countries, especially the developing countries. So maybe with the passage of time, the things will probably improve, because slowly and gradually We may not be complacent with whatever we have achieved, but nevertheless, there is something to feel good about it that well, we have come up to a particular level. May it be that in the times to come, we will progress further and probably shall be much more nearer to it. What comes into mind and whereby my point gets substantiated is that when Odisha super cyclone did strike in India in 1999 on 18th and 28th of October, the number of the casualties over there, and if one when compares it with the cyclone revisiting Odisha and Andhra Pradesh and later on West Bengal, then the casualties was absolutely, much less in comparison. So there was hardly any casualty for that particular event. So that speaks of it that the human life could be saved. Now, what is that? That is again something which has been something good which has come over the period of time. So likewise, if we are feeling it now that well the prevention and the preparedness culture is not in place in a manner in which it should have been in place, then probably earlier the so-called response was not that concertedly available which is available now. So maybe over the period of time, the things will happen and we will be able to cover this particular obstacle also. It is being said that Rome was not built in a day. But I would like to submit it that Rome was built. Try to take help from this particular day that Rome was built and it is before us, though it was not built in a day. So in a sense,
okay. Professor Pardip, very interesting insights you have shared here. I'm sure our participants would be interested to engage you further. So would you be able to wrap up in the next minute and then to give time for discussions and questions?
Well, okay, I wind up right now and then we'll come on to the fore again when I'm given a chance. But nevertheless, the second thing you have, this I will take 2 minutes. The second question which you had said is that is about the lessons to be learned from the past disasters and emergencies. But that is again, I draw it from this G20 Bali Leaders Declaration in Indonesia 15th and 16th of November 2022, which they say that recover together, recover stronger. This is the lesson that we have to work together, we have to recover together, and we have to recover strong. The third thing which you have talked about, that is the role of the government and the policy makers in investing policy issue is that the prevention and preparation for everything. We have to be very clearly made very clear about it. Then integrating local actors and communities into the system so that societies can boost their preparedness. That is again the second thing which is there. Enabling greater access to pandemic products and services that so far as it is the macro level and cutting across the countries is concerned, and then strengthening social protection system for communities is another thing. So this is basically, the things are so vast, and to encapsulate or make a brief of it becomes a bit difficult, but nevertheless, there is some ray of hope which is emanating therefrom. And probably by the concerted efforts of Anirudh and his team, we will be able to have the better future in India so far as managing disasters. And I'm not praying for India only, I'm praying for the world or the globe over, that the things in that manner would be taken up by all concerned so that we could have a good and a comfortable life, and it could justify the creation or existence of the state, which was created primarily for the protection of life and property of the individual human beings. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Professor Pardip. Very insightful sharing of insights on policy challenges with regards to disaster management. I'm actually felt like I should ask you if you would have to advise the Prime Minister of India on what are some of the priorities that they should put forward. What would be one single policy change that you would like to see done to ensure that disaster management would be responsive?
People to be involved in the process of disaster planning. People to be involved at the micro level if we want the things to move in a way in which it is expected to be moved. Because nobody else can decide the thing for me. I must be made a part and parcel of that. It is not because of ego, it is because of my intent, because I am.
Good. Interesting. Thank you very much for that, Professor Pardeep. I'm sure our friends here would have a lot of questions to ask. So you can use the chat box if you wanted to ask a questions, or you can also unmute yourself and come in and engage Professor Pardeep in this very interesting discussion. Professor Dr. Anirudh, you have something to ask? Go ahead.
Not really. I have seen one point raised very pertinent. That is that till 2014 there are lots of programs.
Dr. Day, we lost you. Yeah, go ahead.
No, lost because I saw one message there. Yeah, so I have just switched on my video. So till 2014, there are programs in schools regarding if there are fire incidences, if there are earthquake incidences. So what the community, what the people should do. But after that, all these are stopped. So what's your suggestion? Because this is a very pertinent issue. One person, Mr. Navdeep Singh, he has raised in the chat box. So I just want to echo with Navneet ji that really, Professor Shahani, please suggest what is the best solution to avoid this kind of things, like in Turkestan, there was an earthquake, and because of earthquake, lots of people have died. So if something like that happens here in India or in any other parts of this Asia Pacific region, so what would happen? So first, for
thanks, Dr. Day.
Point of view, then can be.
Professor Shahani, go ahead.
Yes, the point which you are raising, which was done by Navdeep.
Sir, a bit loudly, sir.
Yeah, the point which was made by Navdeep and you have echoed it, that is the crux of it. See, when we came up, we started with the school safety program in India also, but some of the others could not see it in the manner in which it should have been done. The problem is not only that this is not the problem only with regard to India, this is the problem with regard to good number of the countries, that we are good in making the policies and the planning, but we are bad in implementing. It does not take place. Over a period of time, we tend to forget it, but we were supposed to do it. Right? That is one aspect which needs to be taken into stock. That you see, whereby we can ensure that it happens is that is only to the fact that when we have the involvement of the people, they are taken into stock and they are consulted about it, probably the things can go in a better manner. Right. But again, one doesn't find it that well the solutions would be so ready-madely being made available to the people that we will go over there and pick up from the grocery store. No, it is not like that. It is that when we talk of some habit to be formulated, it takes some time for the habit formation. Nevertheless, any good start being made over there will definitely yield better results.
Thanks, Professor Shahani. So the problem actually of implementation is not just specific to India. I think the rest of the world, or even in particular, like from the region where I'm coming from, Southeast Asia, our governments are as problematic, I guess, with India when it comes to implementation. Now, thanks a lot for that, Professor Shahani. I hope you will stay, because I'm sure we have a part on we have a portion on Q&A, which I hope we will have a lively discussion again. For now, may I just request Ms. Singupta from Save the Children to engage with some of the ideas that Professor Shahani have shared, and see from the perspectives of non-government organizations and communities on how you can work together with government to resolve some of this quite tricky policy challenges.
Madam Singh-Gupta, over to you. Go ahead.
Thank you. What I would like to do is, before I start talking about challenges, I feel that I should reiterate that no phenomenon, action, opportunity, or threat is a standalone one. For example, I cannot claim that I myself am very climate conscious. I do not contribute to the increasing carbon footprint, and therefore I should not be affected by the global rise in temperature. That doesn't work. There are interdependencies and intersectionalities among problems of different levels and different sectors. The problems that Professor Sahni spoke about are integrated in different levels. There may be some aspect of it which has to be dealt with at a micro lens, some aspect that has to be dealt with a meso lens, and some aspect that has to be dealt with at a macro lens. And when I'm talking about macro lens, I'm talking about both the national and the international policy landscape, whether it includes existing policy, something that needs to be taken up, or something that we have committed to, but we have not gotten around to getting it done yet. So if you look at the policy landscape that governs this whole scenario, it's a landscape with a huge scope, with a vast scope. Why it is so? Because when we're talking about preparedness and response, when we're talking about disasters, it's not a standalone subject. It doesn't happen in a space which is not connected in any way to any other aspect of the, whether it is a socio-economical context or the political context or the health and nutrition context or even the protection context. It is connected in every way to each and every other subject that is being dealt with, whether by the local government or by the national government or by the international organizations or by national organizations or local organizations or academia or even the people themselves. So when we are talking about challenges, even the ones that Professor Sahni spoke about, they do not exist by themselves. They exist in a context. And that context also needs to be taken care of. When we are talking about challenges, there's a huge number of challenges that we need to consider when we are talking about devising a policy, updating a policy, or even ensuring that that policy is existing and it is known by the people so that they can use it, whether in their governmental work or in their non-governmental work or in their day-to-day lives. So when I'm talking about such kind of challenges, I also want to bring in your attention to the fact that the economic aspect of it also governs and is governed by how people or governments or institutions are reacting or responding or preparing for any crisis. There can be a number of challenges, but for me, I feel this is very critical that we understand exactly how it works in terms of money, because money is a very important factor in our lives. It determines whether we do have the leisure or the ability or the scope to talk about preparedness or response or not after going about our daily livelihood challenges. For me, the economic crisis that has happened, although at some level, the economic growth slowdown had already started before the COVID crisis actually pushed it into this critical context. But the triple threats of COVID on the one hand, climate change on the other, and conflict, if you see at the global scenario, it has transformed our economic context into an economic and labor market shock. It has not only impacted supply when we are talking about production of goods and services, employment of people, but also demand, that's demand side, when we're talking about consumption, purchasing capacity of people, savings habits, investment. So when you're talking about the prospects for the economy and the quantity and quality of employment, these are deteriorating rapidly in this current context. Now, let me give an example of how this affects the micro. A sluggish economy implies less opportunities for skill development, decent employment, job progress, etc. which in turn implies a weak household economy. And if you have a weak household economy, you do not have proper savings, you have very less income to spend on aspects like preparedness, on aspects like risk transference, on aspects like social protection benefits, on aspects like children's education, their skill development. You have very less opportunity to upgrade your lifestyle to prepare yourself for an upcoming crisis. You tend to turn more towards negative coping mechanisms if there is a crisis, because you do not have the opportunity and you're more exposed to the risks and the shocks and stresses of extreme weather events that we all know are increasing in frequency and magnitude. That is how the global economy and the global policy, economic policy decisions are connecting with the micro level aspect when we are talking about preparedness and response. We are talking about coping mechanism. We are talking about adaptive capacity. We are talking about risk thresholds. When we do that, that whole thing is connected. So once we are talking about policy level challenges in terms of how people are looking at their regular community-based preparedness, community-based response mechanisms, how the local self-government is looking at say early warning or community-based preparedness mechanisms like high-rise platforms for tubules or sanitation facilities in a flood-prone area, all that is connected to whatever global policy landscape or the national policy landscape is governing it. It is not only disaster-related policy that we need to think about. We also need to think about the other aspects of people's life that determine whether that person has a scope to talk about this kind of things or not. Another thing that I think is very critical is that if you look at it, in 2018, I think India ranked 5th topmost country affected by weather-related disasters, as per the German Watch Global Climate Risk Index report. As per the same report, India ranked 17th on impacts of weather-related disasters over a 20-year period. I think it was 1919 to 2018. This 20-year period was taken up in that study. 2021, incidentally, was one of the years when the top 10 most expensive extreme weather events occurred around the world. It caused a financial loss of over $1.5 million for Cyclone Taukte, I think, and for Cyclone Yas. The countries, I think, recorded damages worth $3 billion. Now, if you look at it, this cost is only the loss and damage accounting. It does not take into account the response cost, which means how we are ensuring that the families who have been affected by these cyclones have been brought back to their pre-disaster development curve. And what is the cost associated with that? And that is not accounted for. And the most important reason why this cost needs to be accounted for is because when we are talking about local self-government and the subjects that are laid out in the schedules that these local self-governments need to take action on, these are some of the things that they need to take care of in order to ensure that the people in their constituencies come back to the pre-disaster development curve. Now, is that happening at all? If it is happening, what is the cost? Who is incurring this cost? And how are the people coming back to the pre-disaster level? And if it is not happening, then where are these people going? And so that also automatically implies that they are sliding down the different poverty strata into even lower poverty classes. And so when the next disaster happens, even before we talk about response and preparedness, we know that these people will not have the adaptive capacity or the risk tolerance level to ensure that they do not slide into negative coping mechanisms and they can prepare themselves for the crisis impact. So this is how I see that the policy landscape and the basic policy, socioeconomic policy discussions are connected with how we look at things at the macro level, at the meso level, and at the micro levels.
Thanks a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, you wrap up.
Yeah,
ahead.
so I'll take 2 minutes more. I just
Okay.
want to suggest certain recommendations to account for these sort of negative connects and maybe bring in some positive connects. So what I feel is ensuring the agency of a cross-section of the local people at least in the local decision-making platforms helps in utilizing the Gram Panchayat and the urban local development planning process and the Finance Commission funds. Those are there. Those notifications are there that you can use these funds for community-based preparedness actions, but the awareness is not there. Some policies are already there and they need to be used. And further action also needs to be taken in by integrating the climate set of policies and the disaster related policies and their rules and how they are implemented at the macro and the meso and the micro tiers so that there is less duplication. Because as far as I see, both of them are stressing on convergence. The only point in which it differs is who gets to be the nodal department, who gets to convene the meetings. It doesn't matter who convenes the meetings. It matters is if people can come together and work together and collaborate. Social protection floors and widespread risk transference mechanisms are another very critical component of preparedness. Early prepositioning, interdepartmental and interorganizational drills will also help improve the efficiency of response mechanism. However, there needs to be appropriate and relevant policy discussions on that. There needs to be initiation of those discussions. Integrating risk information into policy dialogues on SDGs and other developmental indices will also help us to protect our development investments. And the last point that I'd like to mention is about the development humanitarian nexus and collective outcomes. We cannot think of a development initiative as a standalone initiative and a humanitarian intervention as a standalone intervention. We need to think of collective outcomes and to ensure that we do not stop with a particular partial response, but we treat the entire scenario as a continuum from risk to resilience. That's what I have to say. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gupta, for that very well thought out intervention. I like the way you ended, that we really have to think of that continuum, risks to resilience. If I may ask, given in the landscapes where you are engaging with these communities, would you be able to provide like, I don't know, a good example or a best practice on how communities are grappling with these complexities and responding to the challenges? What are the sort of the successes that we can see on the ground that we can actually highlight? If you can name one.
So, I have two examples actually. One that we have already done and something that we are experimentally piloting. So let me start with what we have already done. So in Assam, in one of the very remote areas in the foothills of Arunachal Pradesh, we have this small community, very remote community, where we started off with a response. When we started off with a flood response, and then within 3 days, there was another flash flood from the upper catchment areas, and literally 5 villages were completely gone. They were not there. They did not exist any longer. And we were trying to cope with what to do with all those people. And we were already reeling under the response. The government was also working with us. And it was a very confusing, very chaotic, very complicated situation. At that point of time, we decided to go with what the people wanted. We sat down with the people, we sat down with the community and the government, and we brought them together. Once we heard what the community had to say, we also brought the government people there. And as you know, Save the Children is an organization which focuses on children's rights as a priority. Children's rights are at the heart of whatever we do. So we spoke to the children, we spoke to the young people, we spoke to the women and the men separately to ensure that no one got left out, no one got left behind. And we tried to understand the unique perspectives of each and every cross-section of persons. And then we brought in the government people there. We do some immediate response, but it is not possible for any organization a non-governmental organization to do the work of the government. And what should you do? It is already the mandate of the government to work with people. So we just need to establish connects, and that is exactly what we did. We have a concept called child-friendly space. I'll give you a small example just to speed it up. We have a concept called child-friendly space, where children can stay safe, indulge in joyful learning and peer-to-peer interaction to reduce the trauma of crisis experience. And children are also safe and at a time where parents are mostly focused on their survival needs, and they are not really looking at the strangers in the camp. They're not really looking at the rising trends of gender-based violence or child trafficking or child marriage in the shelter camp area. So this is a safety protocol for children that we do. And after talking to the people, after talking to their children, we also spoke with the Anganwadi Karmis, Anganwadi Center, the ICTS Center, Integrated Child Development Scheme. It's a flagship scheme of Government of India. And these centers are there in all villages and urban centers. And these provide 6 very essential services like supplementary nutrition for malnourished children and mothers, immunization and other services. So we spoke to the Anganwadi Center ladies, and we told them that if we provide you a space, will you come and resume the services? We also spoke with the government, local government, and they said very happily that we will support, you just provide the space. So we gave the CFS space for their work. We also contacted the local school teachers who were not able to come into the villages because the villages were completely destroyed. So they were relocated actually at a nearby village. So we spoke to the school teachers and they resumed school services there as well. So this is one example where we utilized, and right now the community has been resettled, and they're, I'll not say they're living happily ever after, I cannot guarantee that, but they have their livelihoods and the children are going to school. We go back from time to time. The second thing that I would like to mention very briefly is anticipatory action. This is also very close to my heart because I am currently working on this. Here we try to understand the complex vulnerabilities, the associated risks, the level of risk, the risk tolerance threshold, and the adaptive capacity of children and their families. We also try to understand the short-term, medium-term, and long-term consequences for not being able to cope with the crisis. We then talk to the people. We then talk to the local government, to the academia, and bring in multiple stakeholders. We try to ensure access to real-time location-specific risk information and help the children and their families and the multiple stakeholders who have any stake in that particular crisis situation to anticipate the crisis, set thresholds for individual and group action, and taking early action. The time varies from risk to risk. It may take 3 to 5 days for a cyclone to less than that for a cold wave. So that's what anticipatory action is about. And that is what we are doing in the, that is the second example that I want to say.
Okay,
so
thanks. Yeah, thanks, Mama, Ms. Gupta. Very good examples on what's really happening on the ground. Now we're going to proceed to open discussion. I think we still have a few minutes. I hope we'll have a quick questions and quick responses. And now the main topic that we would like to discuss is about how we can ensure mainstreaming of DRR by addressing the macro policy challenges in disaster management. And I think Professor Shahani have highlighted some of those challenges, and Madam Gupta also shared what are some of the elements that we need to look at. Now, Dr. Islam had a question with regards to the integration or the coherence of DRR and CCA. So maybe this question is particularly addressed to both of you. So let me just read this question. So the governments are now trying to integrate or mainstream DRR and CCA programs into regular development programs under the guidance of macro policy frameworks. Do you think that this integration will dilute the DRR or CCA objectives? Is it good or bad or inevitable for many pressing reasons? So who would like to answer that one first? Professor Shahani or Ma'am Gupta?
I think Professor Shahani has raised his hand. So
Okay, go ahead, Professor Shani.
go ahead, Sani sir.
See, this is the best thing which can be done. Given the flavor which is in existence at the grassroots level, where we find that the disaster does affect people over there, if they are involved in this particular process, it will be able to pave the way for better results. Now, people are represented through their elected representatives whom they have elected. If the elected institutions or elected bodies join their heads and hands together towards addressing the issues, probably they can do it in a much better manner. Where it is documented, the gentleman who has raised this question, I would feel much obliged in case I am able to get his email, because I would pass on the document to him, whereby we have for disaster management, we have earmarked whatever kind of the functions are to be taken up by these elected bodies at the disaster, pre-disaster stage, disaster stage, and post-disaster. Because this is something which will pay a good, yield good results. We will be able to have.
Thank you, Professor Shani. Ms. Sigupta, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, very little, because Professor Sani has already very ably responded to the question.
Okay.
So what I feel is climate change is nothing of a future challenge. It's a present, current context. And if we don't integrate the risks into development interventions, we will not be able to protect our development investments. And in that case, we will continue to move backward or stay stagnant. We will never be able to move forward. So it is very important that we understand the risks and integrate, understand the future potential risks and integrate responses to it, be prepared for it in our development interventions itself, which is why I spoke about the collective outcomes.
Thank you very much. Very good point to make with regards to that particular integration, and also the thinking that climate change is not in the future. It's now, it's happening, and communities are feeling the brunt of climate change impacts.
One very pertinent question, Professor Sheikh Tawhidul Islam from Bangladesh, Jahangirnagar University has raised that do you think that this integration, DRR and CCA, so will dilute the objective? Is it good or bad or inevitable for many pressing reasons? So small answer, in fact, Albert can say not from this particular, because most of the examples are given from India. So Albert can say from Southeast Asia or Asia Pacific region. So we would love to listen something from you.
Yeah, I think it's actually interesting to listen to Professor Shahani and Ms. Singupta sharing, because it feels like it's also the same challenges, except that you're using different terms and share different experiences. But the challenge that we encounter here in Southeast Asia is as much the same challenge that you have there. And maybe the proportions or the contexts are different, but exactly the same. So if you say integration of DRR and CCA, I don't think the policy, the macro policy environments in this region, in the countries in this region, they have successfully integrated. There are some elements wherein they've done that. There are some documents, there are some plans wherein they've tried to integrate, but I don't think it has reached to that level of action that we would need. And we expected from these governments to limit the impacts of climate change disasters. So I think there remains to be done more to ensure that particular integration. So for example, if you look at, and I'm sure you've seen this, and I think this is also what Professor Shani was talking about, if you look at it, the sectors, the DRR sectors, do not really talk a lot to the climate change adaptation sectors. They treat it as totally two different things. And if you go to the government, there's a particular climate change commission or adaptation commission or adaptation agency. And then there's the NDMO, who is really responsible for disasters. In some ways, it's actually useful because disasters are not only climate related, like there are several forms of disasters. So we should be able to respond as well to these disasters. But the fact that these governments are actually tend to think of themselves as only are in this particular domain, and we all be responsible for this. I think it is the problem. That's the challenge, I think, and this is what Professor Shani and also Ms. Gupta tried to highlight. How do we get these governments to think outside the box, to think outside their silos, so that they can actually consider that there are different forms of disasters, and while there are these different forms, we need different levels of interventions. But at the end of the day, all these different forms will result in the same level of suffering to these communities. So how do we respond in a way that actually much more inclusive of different kinds of experiences of disasters and different kinds of people who will be affected? I think to me that's an important challenge, and that is really seen in this part of the world. Thank you for that, for giving me that opportunity, Dr. Day. I think we don't have, do we still have a lot of time? Or I don't think we have, we're already 5 minutes over the time we have set aside, Dr. Day, right?
Can I have 1 minute?
Okay, go ahead.
See, we are talking of this DNR and mainstreaming or integrating it. Let us try to look at the basics of development. Development is a new management. Everybody wants it, many cases, but how do you get it? Who are those few? Those few are the ones those who work in a consulting. We are trying to get government for each and everything. We should not forget it that when they are talking of disasters, government disaster is but
Professor Shani, we lost you.
We lost your voice, sir.
You try again. I think it's good now.
Is it?
Yeah.
Are you getting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just saying, when development is a soothing and mesmerizing term, everybody wants it, many get it. Everybody changes it, but a few get it. Who are those? Those are the ones. We are looking at the
We lost you again, sir. Okay, I think, Dr. Day, were you able to get what Professor Shani said?
No, I am also not getting him properly. So it's a audio problem, maybe.
Okay, but I think we have some sort of a point of convergence, to use the term of Ms. Gupta. I think we're moving towards a convergence here. I think one of the things that we have realized still, despite the amount of efforts by governments, by civil society organizations, the challenge is still enormous. And Ms. Gupta talked about this complexity, to think about the relationships, the connections, the intersectionalities of the problem that we're facing. I think how to face that, how to deal with that, and translate that in a manner also in idioms and syntax that communities can understand is really a challenge for us as actors in this particular sector. So I hope we recognize that, and also maybe try to also to improve the way we engage with these macro policy challenges, because they're definitely complicated, but we're not going to resolve the complications if we ourselves also are quite complicated with the way we articulate those problems. So first, I think we need that clarity among ourselves, being stakeholders in this particular domain, and then we can have a proper conversations with these communities and other stakeholders. So with that, I turn over the stage, if you like, to Dr. Day for the last minute interventions. Thank you very much.
Hannah, you need to please unmute. Hannah, we cannot hear you. Yeah, now, Hannah, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So sorry for that. Anyway, what I was saying is we had a very productive session today, and since we are already overboard on time, so let me quickly move to Ms. Nitha Dar, Director, Bernelli Fellow, GK Foundation, for the vote of thanks.
So I am Nita Dhar, Director of Pillojukti Foundation. This is a non-profitable organization in Madarihat, Alipurduar district. So I like to thanks Dr. Albert Salamanca for this nice moderation for this program. Professor Pradeep Shahani is great speaker for this beautiful delivery. I also express my sincere gratitude and this to Devadrita Di. My thanks goes to Spare India, and Climate Change Action and Resource Network, Asia Pacific. Thank you all of you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nita.
And thanks to all participants.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Once again, the session indeed was very informative and interesting. Thank you all speakers, moderators, organizers, and participants. And we wish that we can have more sessions like this. And before closing, I would like to inform you about our upcoming session, which would be on the topic nature-based solutions for climate change adaptations and disaster risk reduction. So I'm hoping we would have like a very interesting discussion there also, and looking forward to meet you all back there in the next session. Thank you again once again. I can see a hand up, Ms. Devadrita. Do you want to say something?
Yes, it's really a pleasure seeing Nita here, and it's even more of a pleasure hearing the vote of thanks from her. So a special note of appreciation to Nita. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, speakers.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, sir, for accepting our request. Dr. Salamanca, for accepting our request. Devadita, Hannah, for doing this hard work, and for which this could be actually on ground what we could see today, what we have experienced. So all these are possible because of the hard work of Spare India team. And thanks to all the participants also for taking out their time to listen to the guest speakers, Professor Shahani, Devadrita, and our moderator as well as a speaker. So Albert, so we are thankful to all of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye, Albert. Bye.